Kermit the Frog sings, "It's not easy being green." But as a member of the human race, we could say it's not easy being human. I don't know how you feel about it, Amy, but sometimes it's just too people-y out in the world. Do you think you're more introverted or extroverted than I am?
I don't know, Holland. I am right on the bubble.
Right? I feel like I'm the same way. And I think that might be why we like doing the podcast so much. We get to meet so many people, but we aren't right in the same room with them.
Well, we used to be when we recorded in our studio, but
that's true.
Yeah, and it did when we recorded in studio with our guests. It did give a little different energy.
It did, for sure. Yeah. I mean, one of the favorite outcomes I know from what we've done this podcast for 4 years now, and one of the best outcomes is getting to meet so many wonderful people and be connected to them. I mean, there's something to the idea of human connection.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Although I do sometimes think that the world is a little too people-y, especially when I'm driving somewhere. That's when I get a little discombobulated. We have had so many wonderful guests on our show, and some of them have become close friends. It's really been such a sweet thing. And, when you have 8 billion people in the world, it is interesting to think about loneliness and isolation being a huge issue and at an all-time high. And so to help us learn how to connect with a few more of our fellow human beings, we are bringing in the experts.
We're excited to welcome Dr. Blair Kennedy to the Afterword table as we consider the medical and social aspects of human connection. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
And in addition, it is an honor to have Melanie Gordon. She is the creator of the Do Love Walk Collective. She's a coach, a speaker, and I'm not exactly sure the title of saying a Ubuntu Circle Director, if that is correct terminology, but I'm sure, Melanie, you are going to correct me.
So I'm glad to be here. And yes, I train facilitators in this area and help people to create spaces of Ubuntu within their communities.
This is going to be great.
Hi, I'm Holland Webb.
Hi, I'm Amy Boland.
And you're listening to The Afterword, a conversation about the future of words.
Well, you both have personal stories and experiences that we could probably talk about for hours, but we don't have hours. So in just 60 seconds each, would you mind sharing the Cliff Notes version of your life and who you are? And Ann, could we start with you?
Sure. So first, I'm going to say it's Ann Blair. Go have a double first name, Ann Blair Kennedy. And I'm here for a couple of reasons, I think. So I'll give you that history and background. I am a professor at the University of South Carolina School of Medicine in Greenville, where I teach the public health content to the medical students, usually in the first couple of years. But I'm kind of this weird, odd duck being here because I'm in my third career. My first 2 degrees are my bachelor's and my master's are in theater. So I taught public speaking and theater and film appreciation for a couple of years at the college level. And then, I became a massage therapist. And I was a massage therapist for over 23 years, had a great and fantastic practice down in Lawrence County, had my practice right on the square. Then I got really interested in research and just decided that if I really wanted to kind of improve massage therapy research from a massage therapist perspective, then I needed to go back to school. So I started school. My first day of 19th grade was the first day of my daughter being in primer at Christ Church Episcopal School, and my eldest child's first day of second grade. So we all had the same first day of school, and it was great. And it was because of my kids going there that I got to meet and have the wonderful experience of getting to know Melanie. And we ended up doing a whole project here at the medical school on the Ubuntu project, but I did it with her first at Christ Church. So I will hand it over to you, Melanie.
Oh, great. Yes. So I'm Melanie. I am a native of Greenville, South Carolina. There are not many of us, you know that. So born and bred here, even went to the Fine Arts Center here in high school. My first career, like Ann Blair, didn't just fall into this immediately. My first career was teaching. So I was a teacher for 16 years. Also working at the Governor's School for the Arts and Humanities as their recruiter and director of admissions and teaching in the summer program movement. So I have a theater background too. And then decided that it was time to go to seminary. And so I quit my job, sold everything, and went to Duke Divinity School. And my focus there was on spiritual formation, looking at chaplaincy. And that's not where I ended up. So I went from there to working for the United Methodist Church, the general church, and helping to equip pastors and work with children, young children, up through age 12, and did that for 10 years out of Nashville. And then things changed in the church, and I came back to South Carolina and started teaching biblical studies and ethics and also religion at Christ Church Episcopal School, where I started in my second year as coordinator, then director of diversity and inclusion there, and met Ann Blair there through our Ubuntu circles, which we did not only with students, but with faculty, staff, and parents. And so I was there for 3 years. Now I'm doing Do Love Walk Collective as its founder. And it has been a wonderful experience to bring these experiences to other communities. So glad to be here.
So exciting. And now you're at Furman.
Yes, where am I now? So yes, I'm also part-time chaplain, university chaplain at Furman University. Been there since May, and it's fabulous.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So excited. All right. So as we were talking about earlier in our intro, the world is in need of connection. We understand that. But oftentimes without a base or agreement in words, things can get lost in the shuffle, and that hinders relationships when you're using a word that maybe has a different meaning than you would understand or could be reflected differently. So we would like to lightning round, the 101 version of these words, not the 601, because I'm talking to, higher ed people here, because our audience is varied. And so we want to make sure everyone understands what we're talking about today as we're thinking about human connection. So the first one, and this is something that I think it's interesting, when Holland and I did an episode on supply chain, it was right at the pandemic and everybody started hearing, oh, supply chain, we know what this is now. We're starting to hear this phrase, social determinants of health, a lot more. So in case you haven't heard about this, tell us what it is, either one of you.
So I'll jump in on that one. And you might actually hear it change a little bit, because I was just in with a session from the National Institutes of Health just before this, and we're talking about whole person health. So it's taking this idea of social determinants of health as part of this idea of whole person health. But social determinants of health is just a framework and a way to think about everything that goes into what makes a person be healthy. Because a lot of times we just think about medical, like going to the doctor, that's what goes into health and how you do that. But it's really not. There's a lot of different things that go into this, including if you think about where people, I love this, the way they phrase this, where people are born, live, learn, work, play, and worship, and age and grow. So if you think about all of those pieces, so around health, functioning, quality of life, and it usually comes down to these 5 specific areas of economic stability, educational attainment, or how much education you can get, how much access you have to healthcare and the quality of that care, neighborhoods and the environment. Like, do you have green spaces? How close are you to a park? What about sidewalks in your neighborhood? As well as that social and community context. Do you have those connections? Because that goes into your health as well.
I love this new phrase, whole person health. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, are we cutting edge or what?
Yeah, I just came out. I mean, it was like literally like right before this. That's what I was in.
That's awesome. Melanie, do you have anything to add?
No, I'm leaving this one to Ann Blair. She's the expert in this area. And I say kudos. That's all great.
Okay, good. All right. How about this one? We talked about 8 billion people in the world, and yet there's so much loneliness. What is social isolation?
So social isolation is that lack of connection, lack of social connection. And loneliness can be a part of that, but you can also have connections and have lots of them and still feel lonely. So there is kind of that mixed piece of it, where that loneliness is just a little bit different. But we need to look at how many connections, how great and thick and interwoven they are. Like if you think about somebody at work, do you go to lunch with them or do you just go to meetings with them? Can you go to them for emotional support? What about going to friends for for some financial support? Who can you go to? Do you have all of and there's all these different types of domains that go into social support, which if you don't have that, you can think about being in some form of social isolation.
Makes sense. Melanie?
Yeah, and Blair, I love that. And I think the thing that came to my head as you were talking is that you can be socially isolated in a space where you have many people, like in a workspace. You can be working in a big corporation and still feel isolated from everyone around you, no connection whatsoever with those people. And it is very different from loneliness, but can actually be, it is related to loneliness.
Yeah. And it's that age thing too. I remember my grandparents my one grandma lived to be 101. And one of the things they remarked about is that they didn't have any more peers to talk with. Because, they could talk with me, but my connection was not socially commensurate with them. I couldn't talk about some of the same things that they had experienced in their lives. And I totally can see that would be a player with social isolation. Yeah. All right. How about this one? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. I know people are starting to put this in an acronym.
Yes, there are lots of acronyms for this, just by moving letters around and all kinds of things. And so one of the things I decided to do, because here's the thing you're going to find about these terms. No matter who you talk to, they're defined differently. So I went to a down and dirty, simple definition for these. So diversity. Diversity is your proportionate representation across all dimensions of human difference. Instead of listing everything, we're looking at all dimensions of human difference. Equity is ensuring access, resources, and opportunities that are proportionate to the need for assurance of full participation in the community. Then you have inclusion. That means that everyone is included. They are seen, they are heard, they are considered. And I wanted to add something here, if you will. Belonging.
Absolutely.
So I'm adding belonging to this, because that's the piece I always look at. Belonging means that everyone is treated and feels like a full member of the larger community and can thrive within that community. Mm. And I always look at these as like a table, and Ann Blair's like, oh my gosh, Melanie and the table. So maybe you're not saying that, but people did. Anyway, so the table. So if you look at going to your dinner table, diversity means you have people that are different, at the table. Equity means that for everyone sitting there, let's say that, for me, I can't have gluten. And there may be a vegan. So what are you serving people so that everyone can enjoy the meal together? Inclusion starts to look at whose voices are heard at that table as you start conversing, who's able to speak. Like there's spaces where young people at the table can't speak, right? So allowing that space. And belonging is that sense of, I love being here. I love these people. They make me feel like I should be here. I belong in this space. So
I love it.
Definition. There you go.
I love it. And a table has 4 legs, and you have 4 parts to this.
Yeah, that's going to be a good one to take. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah. All right. And how about this last one? Reconciliation.
Reconciliation simply is the restoration of relationships. So you're going to see across the board that there are either 3 steps or 5 steps or 10 steps to this. But the consistent thing in that movement of reconciliation is truth telling, allowing yourself to be vulnerable, allowing yourself to be a compassionate listener in that process of restoring the relationship.
Okay. And Blair, anything else to add?
Nope, she nailed all of that. I like all of the things.
Excellent. All right. We're now on the level playing field, if you will, or the table legs have now been tightened and now we have something to move forward with. Awesome.
All right. Well, what are some of the key elements to human connection, and why is it vital to develop these in our relationships?
So I guess I'll go first. So with human connection, knowing that we are created for interdependence, right? All of us need one another to survive and to thrive. I talk about this when I talk about Ubuntu all the time, that needing one another to know that we are human. We need to know that that there are others who support us and care about us and can relate to us. And we also have to find ways within this to leaning into compassion. How do we offer compassion to others and finding ways to relate to what other people are going through? So often we have a hard time with this piece because we haven't practiced it. So what would it mean to lead with compassion as we are relating to other people?
And it's because we're a social species, right? It's because we're that interconnected. Really, we're driven to find those connections. Because in the past, it was how you would survive. You had to work together. And all the pieces that go together in it, and when I think of modern day life, is there's always trust. You have to help build trust in those human connections. But there's also that vulnerability piece of being willing to reach out. And another piece, because I did mention I've been a massage therapist for forever, 23 plus years at this point, is that also that part of touch. And touch is so important. And what are the ways that we can get it in healthy ways? Because there's so many different places and times where touch is being taken out. Like the little kindergartners not being able to hug their teacher. That's just, that makes me very sad because it's so important. And when we look at touch in particular, especially with babies who aren't touched don't thrive and they can die. And we see that in animal models too. I don't want to go into this very sad study because Melanie and I talked about it the other day. It's just, there's a very sad study that was done around touch and monkeys. And I could go into it, but I won't. But it's just, there's so many different pieces of it. And those are just a couple of them.
Yeah.
It's interesting. We tend to think about some of this as like a nice to have. But like you said, our ancestors wouldn't have thought of it that way. And we had another guest on, we learned about, was it evolutionary psychology? Did I get the phrase right, Amy? Where he talked about how things that our ancestors learned to do are part of what keeps us alive, even if we're not as aware of it in modern life. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's more than just this is sweet. This is actually a survival tactic, as you were saying, Blair. Yeah. All right. So let's go a little deeper into that concept. And feel free to share whatever you'd like to, even if it's sad, because we're going to come back to hope at the end. I know we will. What are the physical, mental, and emotional benefits of human connection, and what happens when these are lacking? You mentioned the idea of babies not thriving. And I think, many of us have heard of some of these orphanages in other countries where babies just have not thrived because they were never picked up from the crib, and that kind of thing. But let's break it out into some other areas: physical, mental, emotional benefits. What do you think?
Well, since you brought up the orphanages, I'm going to go there first.
Go for it. Yeah.
So there was the Massage Therapy Foundation funds community service grants. And one of the things that they have done at least twice is they've sent massage therapists over to Uzbekistan to work with orphanage workers. And they also went to Tokyo as well after the nuclear accident there. And what they found, these massage therapists went over to train the workers within the orphanage to then help work on the children on a regular basis. And there were some children there that were bed-bound, crib-bound, because they hadn't gotten touched. And after the massage therapy, they were able to walk. I love that one.
Wow.
Yes. So that's a physical benefit of actual touch, right? But we know that there are other pieces around health and wellness. So we know that social connection is vital for being able to survive cancer. Those people who have social connections and have good social connections are more likely to live longer. Simply put, good connections help reduce anxiety and depression. So we're looking at that mental and an emotional piece. It's just something that everybody needs. It impacts your health in multitudes of different ways.
Interesting.
I think it has something to do with our level of joy also. A couple of things that when I was working for the church, one of the things that I learned through these different types of ways, resources that we use with helping children grow in faith, is this thing called offering a blessing to children that anyone can do, right? And I was taught this by one of my really good friends who's been a pastor for absolute ever. And she started doing this thing when she became a children's minister of just blessing a child by just putting a cross across their head. And it wasn't like formal or anything, but what she saw and what I've seen and what others have seen as we started kind of pushing this out into churches is that children who were disconnected from their children's minister or from the person who was in ministry with them started trying to find that person after worship or after whatever to get their blessing, right? So suddenly there's this connection that, we've connected. Now maybe we can start doing some other work together, right? So they made that connection through something so simple as just a simple touch on the forehead and looking in the eye, and part of it was you get to their level, you look into their eyes and you say, you are a blessing, that simple.
Wow.
I
just love that.
Well, I want to, if I can, tie it back to your work, Melanie, with the Ubuntu projects, because that's what we've been instituting those here at the medical school now we're in our second year. And just the outcomes from that have just been fantastic. There's such burnout in our healthcare providers and for our faculty and staff who took part in this. We saw a full reduction of 1 point out of 5, which is pretty big. Reduction in burnout over just going to 8 different meetings and connecting with people through this work. And we saw an increased levels of belonging with our medical students and a reduction in social isolation for them too. So it's been really a fantastic thing that Melanie has created to help build this connection between people.
Some of what you said reminds me a little bit of a couple of episodes that we've done on dementia and brain health. talking about the importance of, we've talked so much about socialization. In fact, if I'm remembering correctly, and I'm just pulling this out of my memory here, when we were interviewing Dr. Budson, Amy, about dementia and about brain health, and he said, there are 5 things you can do to maintain good cognitive skills throughout your life. And he talked about diet and exercise, cognitive stimulation, disease control, and then socialization. And he said, now what's the most important one of those? And Amy and I together said, probably exercise, right? And he said, no, it's socialization. If you got to pick one of the 5, pick socialization. So some of the things that you all were saying as you're going along reminded me about how important that is too for people's longevity as well as for folks who have dementia.
Yeah, absolutely.
Holly,
Yes.
Something you just reminded me of is, again, when I was kind of looking back at my work and when I was working for the church, I worked with younger children. And I had my friend Rick who worked with older adults, and we called ourselves Alpha and Omega. Haha. But one of the things that he taught me, and I have since continued to pay attention to, was that so many of our older members in our churches, in our communities, they don't get touch every day, especially if they live alone. So one of the things that I started doing when there was the passing of the peace or whatever was seeking out people who did not who lived alone and didn't get that contact. And it started making this we started seeking each other out, So there became this expectation of someone's going to see me. But I learned that from Rick. But I thought that was a pretty cool thing.
That is really good. I like that. I like you adding that. Thank you for adding that in. Do you have a personal story that illustrates the impact of learning how to develop human connections?
And Blair, you want to go first?
Well, I'm going to let you go first, but I can.
Go for it.
All right. So Melanie has heard me tell this one story before, but when I first joined her Ubuntu groups for parents and went through my training to become a facilitator, I realized that all my stories were only about work because you would tell stories. And I realized that was probably not a great thing. Like, okay, there we go. So I decided because of this group and realizing that I was drowning myself in work, that when an opportunity became available, because all your neighborhood Facebook groups, right? So somebody put out in the neighborhood Facebook group to join a group, and I looked at it and I thought, well, that could be interesting. At me being, at the time I was about 48. So I joined a group in my neighborhood who plays Dungeons and Dragons on Wednesday nights, and they're all in their late 20s, early 30s. And these are people that I never would have gotten to know in any other way. So Wednesday nights are nerd night, or what I call it. So and I protect my nerd night incredibly well. So this has been like about a year that I've been doing this. And these people have become so important to me. And I think I've become important to them. And just to be able to have those connections. And let me tell you, I was so nervous when I first went over there. Like, I don't know any of these people. And how do you make friends when you're an adult? Because it's not like when you're 3 and you can walk up to somebody and say, hey, I like blueberries. You like blueberries? Let's be friends. It's just hard to make friends when you're a grown up. And so these people have really become friends for me. And it's just so unlike anything I would have done before. But just seeking that connection outside of work was really important for me.
I love that.
Thanks, Melanie, for doing that to me.
Yeah, you're quite welcome. I just love the whole blueberries thing. You said that a couple of times. It's great. For me, when I think about this, actually comes in my call into ministry. And my father had a very rare form of kidney cancer. So we were down at Emory with him on multiple occasions. And one of the things I noticed when we were there was that for my dad, he was very fortunate in our family. When someone's in the hospital, nobody ever leaves them alone. So they always have someone there until my dad would throw us out and say, I would need to be alone. You're here too much. But what I started to notice was that there were so many patients in the hospital that no one came to see, because when we were down there, we were there for 3 weeks at a time. No one came to see them. They were in their rooms. Nurses can only do so much. Staff can only do so much. And I started visiting them. I just started kind of wandering into rooms. I don't know if I was supposed to or not, but their doors were open, and having conversations with them and looking forward to just those very short moments that we made some contact with one another. And I hope for them, as it was for me, it was very life-giving for me, because it offered me the opportunity to move focus from what was going on with my dad, which was really hard, to just be present for them in that space. So it was very life-giving.
I love that. Those are such wonderful stories. And again, yes, there's a benefit to us personally, but also there was a benefit to other people. Ann Blair, you definitely brought some fun to the party at D&D night for Nerd Group, I'm sure, even if it was just blueberries. Melanie, I know you helped, those folks who sat there. I used to work in a nursing home. That was my summer job every summer. And, months and months go by and no one comes to visit. It's such a blessing, but yet you also get it yourself. That's sweet. That's sweet. All right. So we're going to wrap up this first. I don't feel like it's like we just started talking. It's like, we have to wrap up our first part of this episode. I don't want to do this. All right. So good thing we have a second part, but I would love for you to wrap up with an essential element. Boil this down. Why do we need to have human connection?
I think it's just for survival. I really do. I think it just boils down to we need each other. Mm. And we survive because we are connected to one another. And when we're not connected to one another, we don't thrive, and we can't live our best lives.
Wow.
She's still my answer.
I'm sorry, Ann Blair.
Well, I just can't say it any better than that. She got it perfectly. That's pretty much exactly what I would say. It's just essential. We have to do it.
Well, with that, we're going to say thank you to Melanie and to Ann Blair. We have so much more to talk about. While you wait for part 2, please go to theafterwordpodcast.com and become a subscriber. Leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts, and tell your friends about us. And as always, remember that you are welcome at our table.